The Marketing Mixtape, a space where we cut through the noise and focus on what matters in marketing.
I'm going to throw some.
Sorry, just a really simple example. If you're attributing cost per lead, but the leads are really bad, then your attribution model is doomed for failure. Whereas, like, that's why these people, I see a lot of businesses now, attributing for engaged leads versus leads, as you might say,
As a whole.
leads. Exactly, because they realize that, hey, we can get our cost per lead down, but if the leads aren't good, then we're back to square one. So how do we start to drive accountability in the top of the funnel is by setting parameters that we are willing to be held up as accountable. So all they care about is engaged leads. So they're willing to pay X per engaged lead. Well, that's the KPI. Build the attribution model around that. And that's how you kind of build an attribution model, which is simple, everyone can understand. And an important point to this is that if people in the marketing team or the stakeholders in the marketing team don't understand the attribution model, you also have a problem. So attribution as a model is important, but it's also important that it is translatable to the team, because what can't be communicated can't be executed. So if you want this to be something that everyone can relate to, it needs to be simple.
For sure. And I think explaining the why behind the attribution model also highlights the importance of capturing those key data points, whether that is from the sales team, the customer success team, whether it's from the marketing team. If they understand the importance of tracking those key criteria for the attribution model, then that becomes essential as well. And so having said that, because a lot of what we're talking about is made possible when we have that tracking set up. So when we start talking about a tech stack for attribution modeling and for tracking, what are we looking at? Like, what are the very basics that we need to have in place? And then do you recommend any kind of maybe slightly more advanced professional tools when we're ready to take attribution modeling to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything starts with what you are willing to get set up correctly from the outset. So GA4, for example, has extremely powerful buyer journey, user journey insights. To be honest, if Google Analytics 4 is set up correctly, which I don't see very often, you shouldn't really have the need to go too much beyond that, unless you have like a really complex buyer journey, or maybe have multiple channel sources that aren't tracked with GA4. So the first thing that I would start from is user ID tracking. So that means when somebody becomes part of your funnel, they're assigned a user ID. That means that immediately every single event in the funnel is tracked. And there's lots of ways this can be done. This can be done with Google Analytics 4. This can be done with Segmetrics. This can be done with Kissmetrics. This can be done with Power My Analytics. There are multiple tools out there that you can use to track user ID. Then once you've got a user ID, ultimately what you're doing is you're building an attribution model, having a single source, a single path to track. Because the problem you have with since iOS 14 and GDPR is that how do you track multiple device conversions? So if somebody converts on their phone as a lead, but then signs up on their computer, how do you marry those conversions? How do you connect those conversions? So that's why there is a lot of external software that will help, a lot of external software solutions and technology services that will help you kind of connect and marry those dots. But at the end of the day, the key is user ID tracking from the outset. And then from that, really building your attribution model based off something which you can easily interpret and read into the data. As I said before, attribution models that people don't understand are worthless. Attribution models that your team can make decisions on in real time are very powerful. So the ones that I choose, I've worked with and like are definitely Segmetrics. GA4 obviously from the outset is probably the go-to. Segmetrics is very powerful. You have Kissmetrics as well. Hyros is very good for PPC, just paid media. But then again, the more channels of traffic that you bring into your funnel, the more complex it gets. So that's why you often see these new businesses or things pop up. They're only using one source of traffic, and it's not just by chance. It's because they realize the more sources of traffic they have, the more difficult it is to start to analyze where you are getting your maximum ROI. So Yeah, multi.
Does that highlight the importance then as well of being easily able to integrate these tracking tools with each other, so we don't have standalone metrics that we've then got to figure out how we bring together. So tools that talk to each other and that talk to our CRM. I think that's a key one as well.
Yeah.
Plugging into our CRM, so that we can get conversion, we can get a clear view of those conversion activities, and see the buyer journey behind those in a tool that we're using every day to look at our customers, and B, to make sure that it's getting tracked. And that brings me to another point. What about offline conversions? What part does that play in the picture?
So offline conversions are complex because there has to be some level of manual, or you can use Zapier to kind of bring your offline conversions to your dashboard and kind of update the data sources of where those conversions came from. But again, as you said, like the big issue is how does everything natively integrate? And at the end of the day, from 2023, 2024 experience, because I don't know when people are going to watch this, it's 2024 already, but if you're in 2023 experience is that you can throw a lot of technology, but you're still going to have gaps. So that's why human input is really, really important, because human input will allow you to navigate and make the best decisions with the least risk in regards to those attribution models. Attribution models are not perfect, and technology is neither. And just as you said, like offline conversions, when you upload them, how do you attribute them? Will there be a window that is, you might say, linear with the lead flow, so you can actually marry the conversion window and say, oh, this ROAS is equivalent to this, is attribute to this channel. So it becomes very complex, and that's why from the beginning I recommend is user ID tracking. And that way, from the first point they enter your funnel, you have a journey, and you can start to build conclusions or your attribution model around a mass of your data. There's going to be a certain percentage of your data that is going to be very difficult to include inside the attribution model because of these different elements that make it incongruent and complex. As I said before, somebody moves to an IP address and they use a different email and a different device, boom, disappeared. Somebody who signs up using a burner email and then converts on another email, different device, boom, we have a gap. So how do you account for that? That's why there is a gap in attribution, and that's why you need human input.
And we don't want to get lost in the weeds, like we're saying, that let's get a solid model set up that works, and then use the data that's giving us, test hypotheses like we talked about in our last episode. But I guess like we said at the beginning, don't get lost in the weeds. And if our ad spend is at a point that justifies it, then start to build an internal team, an in-house team. Like you said, human-centric, data analysts, data scientists play a big role in understanding the data and putting it into a format that essentially tells us a story, and that's to see what is happening.
Yeah.
What are the numbers telling us?
And to finish off with that, as I said, attribution has a lot of nuances, like all paid media and most marketing. But the key here is there's like three things that will help differentiate attribution in a business. And one is flexibility. So again, the more flexible you are as a business and a team, the better. That you can relate that to the software and your attribution model. Two is focus your energy on what you care, on what part of the funnel you most concerned. And lastly, look at everything holistically, because at the end of the day, attribution is to build decisions that will shape the strategy of your business. And as you said, like if you get lost in the weeds, it's most likely more times people get lost than they actually start making a decision and say, well, actually, this has really moved my business forward. I've very rarely seen people run attribution tests and come back with like really conclusive data without getting lost somewhere along the way. So attribution is a bit like a rabbit hole, and you have to know when to stop and say, okay, I've got what I came here to get, and I'm going to make a decision and move on. And then come back and look at it, a certain amount of time later and say, well, what's changed? What can I see? And it's very similar to our previous episode where we talked about split testing. There's only a certain amount you can split test at once. to kind of build data based on 100% criteria, not false positives. So attribution is the same. So for me, it'd be flexibility, focus on what part of the funnel you're most sensitive to and what you really care about, because you can't work on everything at once in attribution model, and don't get lost along the way.